Good evening and welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Cabinet of the 24th of July 2024. I'm Councillor Michael Jones, Leader of the Council and Chair of the Cabinet. There are no scheduled fire drills tonight, so in the event of the fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the main spiral staircase and through the main reception doors. Sure. Once outside, please turn left to make your way to the fire assembly point located beyond the multi-storey car park on Exchange Road. If you're unable to use the stairs, please wait in the council chamber and you'll be guided by a member of the staff to the evacuation lift. This meeting is being live streamed via the council's YouTube channel. Please note that there is no comments function available as part of this webcasting. The council is the data controller and will retain the data collected during this webcast. This will be done so in accordance with the council's published data retention policy. Any members of the public seated in the public gallery should be aware that by entering the chamber they are consenting to their image being captured by the automated camera system. Recordings will be used for webcasting and or training purposes. Councillors are reminded to take note of what is displayed on the screens in the room as this shows what is being recorded and webcast. Cameras are currently set to capture you in seated positions, so please remain seated when speaking, not usually an issue at Cabinet. You can request to speak as usual in committees by raising your hand, to speak by pressing the button with a face on it, and the microphone will go green when you are live. So we will now commence with apologies for absence. I believe we've not received any. No. Perhaps Tira's running late. We'll move on then to the next item, which is disclosures of interest. Does any member have any disclosures of interest? No, not seeing any. Public question time. On the grounds that I don't see any members of the public, unless Russell wants to ask a few questions, I think I won't go through the full paraphernalia there, but of course members of the public are welcome to come along to Cabinet and ask us any questions relating to the council if they so wish. Item 5, further notice of intention to conduct business in private and notifications of any representations. Please can I ask the Deputy Monitoring Officer to confirm if we've received any notifications?
No, we haven't yet.
Thank you. Item 6 is matters referred to the Cabinet and any report from the Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. Welcome to Councillor Marion Ayling. As normal, Councillor Ayling, I'll bring you in during each item to comment. Have I missed the minutes? I do apologise if I have. Then yes. Yes, the minutes. Yes. Now we come to the minutes of the meeting held on 13th of March. Yeah. It's not, is it?
Yeah, no.
Oh, it's okay. Yes. Does the Cabinet agree that the minutes are an accurate record of the meetings, if you can remember that far back? Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Right, in that case, apologies for that. That's item 7. We'll move on to the reports. We will start with the financial outturn, the budget monitoring quarter 4 report. I went into significantly more detail at the OSC yesterday than I intend to tonight. However, it would be worth saying that 23-24 was an extremely challenging year for the council, and officers and councillors worked tirelessly to take the corrective action needed during the year to address the expenditure pressures. Now, the final outturn comprised of a large number of variations. Temporary accommodation continued to be the main area of service expenditure pressure, which we have no direct control over, and that's certainly familiar for some time now. There were expenditure variances relating to the new town hall, specifically the district heat network, potentially business rates, expenses related to the old town hall, expenses related to electricity and gas and the Create building. And I think that got discussed at quite some length at OSC, which but clearly if any members of Cabinet wants to raise any point related to this report, they can ask about that later on. That's not while it's we should recognise the areas of negative variance. We shouldn't lose sight of the positive variance we also have in the budget. There's been some real success in our increased car parking income at Kingsgate and Orchard Street, and also we have made savings in repairs in relation to the refuse fleet after the successful planned capital investment in the new fleet. Our investments were very successful. We've got 1.341 million additional on top of what we projected, which is certainly helpful, and that's on top of planned in-year savings, which delivered another just under 1.5 million. So, in conclusion, overall, we end the last financial year in a slightly better than predicted position, just under £450,000 better off. As I said at OSC yesterday, that makes our job slightly easier this year in terms of working out the sustainable long-term financial position of the council. However, the word has to be stressed, it's slightly easier. There will still need to be some tough and firm positions to keep us to keep this council in proper financial order, which we will consider and we will apply responsibly. So, just to move on from that, as I say, I think that there was a good discussion about this at the Commission yesterday, and so I'll bring in Councillor Ayling to present the Commission's comments.
Thank you. The Commission considered the report FIN 658 of the Head of Corporate Finance. During the discussion with the Leader of the Council and the Head of Corporate Finance and Chief Accountant, the following comments were made. The rising cost of repairs was explained. There is now an awareness of damp and mould. Repairs were urgent, but it is important to do maintenance to avoid properties falling into disrepair. Information was provided on the funding available from the Better Care Fund. Clarity was sought and obtained with regards to the addition of a senior project manager in the built environment team, together with the demand for the delivery of capital projects. It was noted that the homelessness and temporary accommodation pressures continue to rise, and there are many contributing factors for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ayling. I think it is written as despair on the sheet, isn't it? So you weren't wrong, but maybe that's the dangers of autocorrect. So perhaps it's right. No. You read it, but then you corrected it but it was the wrong word on the sheet. So never mind. Yes. Not to worry. Right. Okay. Well, in that case, item 7, I have Councillor Crowe as Leader of the Opposition has requested to speak.
Yes. Thank you very much, Chairman. I would share your view that it has been a challenging year financially for the council, and the report was somewhat of a grim read, I'm afraid to say. The chart, the graph at the top of page 11 sets out the figures of the overspent and underspent, and before the extra investment interest is taken into account, we were looking at a figure of £5 million, which is or £5.096 million, which is a significant amount. Now, the challenges of temporary accommodation and homelessness are well known to this cabinet and to the town. But I calculated that the 3.244 or 3,244,000 figure for housing that the overspend is 63% of the overall total of that £5.09 million. So there is 37% that is not related to the housing portfolio, and it does represent a significant sum. For example, within that, there's the £280,000 overspend because of the pay award, which wasn't forecast correctly. And I just sort of sound a warning there for future forecasts, given that the current pay award has yet to be settled, but we've already seen, and it's just an independent process, and I appreciate it will be a difficult decision for the new government, but we've already seen a recommendation from the independent review body for teachers and health workers of 5.5%. And if they, I'm not giving a view as to whether the government should accept that recommendation or not. But if they do, I can see that there is a risk of other unions wanting greater pay rises, which could therefore make our pay settlement for local government difficult, and therefore put future pressures on the budget. You have, Leader, mentioned the extra investment interest, and that is very welcome, and that may actually, because I suspect interest rates are going to stay a bit higher for a bit longer, because I think we do have a greater risk of inflation coming back, even though we do have had 2 months at 2%. I fear, and again, it could be potentially fueled by pay increases, that inflation may well start to rise from 2%, and therefore interest rates may stay higher for longer. But the upside of that is that the council would receive more in investment interest. But even with the investment interest is taken into account, we have ended the year, or at slightly better, at 3.755 million for quarter 4 than was the 3.9 million projected at the outturn for quarter 3. But that is a significant budget variance, and while I appreciate budget forecasting is not easy to do at all, obviously the next year's budget is going to be very important. We should not be having variances of 3.7 million. We ought to be have a good indication of what the costs and expenses are going to be. I was also a little bit disappointed, well, more than a little, disappointed at the 900,000 overspend for the new town hall. That was, and that had increased from the previous quarter as well. And I thought I might hopefully find some solace reading the housing revenue account report, but I didn't, unfortunately, because that has deteriorated quite a lot as well. But there was a couple of little pleasant nuggets in there, like extra car parking income. So it's not all gloom and doom, but I think the report very well sets out the challenges that we've had for this year and that we're going to have for the year ahead. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. Certainly no one is trying to understate the financial pressures that the council are facing. However, I think far from being grim, I think this report actually is more positive than I was expecting. I take the point about issues relating to new town hall expenditure. However, a good number of those are related to our business model that assumes some of the shared costs of things like heating and other shared bills with which going forward will be shared by our tenants, and it hasn't been possible up until now for one reason or another. And I think this should mean that it's much less of an issue over the coming months. As far as the comments about the National Pay Awards, again, our finance officers are in a difficult position because it's an estimate. It's the National Pay Award for staff is not negotiated by us, and I think the finance officers try and give it their best guess. But effectively, it is a best guess because it's out of our control. I think what I might do is I might request the finance officers to give some consideration to whatever we have in our current projections, just to be sure that we're casting a realistic amount in terms of what it might actually cost us. Saying that, the danger is if we go too far the other way and it's an overestimate, then again that's not helpful for future projections either. So I think this is just one of those ones where ultimately we don't necessarily know what we're going to get until it's actually been agreed, and that's where it is. Councillor Crowe's absolutely right about the better the better investment income. I would say that it's not just the underlying good interest rates, but I would also say it's reflective of the good performance by our in-house finance team and actually getting those investments for us. So I thanked them at OSC last night, but I will repeat that. I think it's worth recognising, I think, and hopefully perhaps for the minutes that we recognise that achievement, which I have no doubt that additional money will make a significant difference to us over the coming year. So with that, thank you, Councillor Crowe. I'll now open the debate for other Cabinet members. Oh, before I do, just to welcome Councillor Rana to the meeting. Councillor Rana, do you have any declarations of interest? No, thank you very much. Thank you. Right, can I see Councillor Mrs Mullins, right, and Councillor Irvine. Okay, Sue.
Thank you very much. I noticed from all of this that once again the real pressure on the council is what we're having to do with our homelessness, which is growing all the time and doesn't seem to go down in any way, and the projections are just that it's going to become more. We talk very glibly about temporary accommodation and nightly paid accommodation, but what we tend not to think about when we use these words is what are actually people are being inflicted on. You know, if you're homeless and you've got children and you end up in a one-bedroom in a hotel somewhere, you just imagine you can do that when you're on holiday for 1 night, 2 nights, or even 3 nights. But when it's going to be weeks and you have no prospect of when it will end, then it becomes incredibly difficult for families to survive that way. And it's something we need to keep in the back of our minds. We say, oh, okay, we've got people in temporary accommodation, they're fine. Temporary accommodation is not fine. It is temporary, should be temporary, but it's not a good place for our families to be. We've got extra pressures now because we've had the Chagossians coming, and they're welcome to come, and if they are applicable and they fit into the barriers that we put in place for the housing, then obviously we are obliged to help them. And it's great that maybe the government are going to help us out with some extra money, but it means that we have to pay up front and then hope for goodness we're going to get it back at some time, which doesn't make it very easily when you're trying to balance the books. We've got Open House, which as far as I know is absolutely bursting at the seams. Open House is the place where single people can go and be helped and supported. But it's got a limit to it as well. It's no longer, I think we actually need another open house because we've got so many people now looking for support and looking for help. When we talk about money within the council and how predictions are, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't look in there and say, this is what's exactly going to happen. It has to be done with our great financial officers who really put their heads together and try and make a really good guess at what's going to happen. But they can't be, as I say, they haven't got a crystal ball. They cannot be absolutely sure of it, but they can only do what would be the best guess. We talk a lot about inflation. Now inflation is down to 2%. We hear a lot of people saying, isn't it wonderful that the last government managed to get us down to 2%? But when we say that, it doesn't mean that people's bills are going down or their food's going down in price. The 2% or however many percent it was stays where it was, and therefore the prices are as high as they are. Inflation may be 2% now, but that 11% that it went up to meant that everything became incredibly expensive, not only for our residents who have to do their shopping and buy their food, but for the council itself who needs to do repairs and building, and everything that they then buy is far more expensive. So it's very nice to be able to say, oh, wonderful, we're down to 2%. But that doesn't mean that we're better off. It just means we're really badly off, but not getting as bad. It's not getting worse quite as fast. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue. I absolutely agree. At OSC last night, we did recognise the sheer human cost of this, and there was a good discussion last night in terms of the implications. And you're also right. Inflation is just an increase on what it is already. It's still going up. So if it was difficult to afford before, it's still just as difficult, if not worse. Okay. So I've got Councillor Irvine next, and then Councillor Chris Mullins after that.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with you. I thought we did have a good discussion on this last night, particularly on homelessness, and I agree with everything that Councillor Mullins has said. And following on from our discussion last night, made me think of a few other things. And I do have great confidence in our homelessness team. I think they do a very good job, and I'm thankful that for example, although we do have to place people out of borough, as I said last night, a large proportion of those placements aren't actually very far from the borough boundary. They're usually in the Hawley area, and there are councils up and down this country where you can't actually call it temporary accommodation anymore, because the temporary accommodation has become permanent for a lot of people, and thankfully, I don't believe we're in that situation here in Crawley. It's a very, very difficult job which the council is doing. I believe the council is doing it well, and I have to say that I am hopeful that now we have a new government that includes a lot of council leaders as new MPs who've struggled with all these issues over the last few years, that things will start to change. And I'm quite sure that if they don't start to change, we will be lobbying the government as you would any other government. Turning now to the housing revenue account, we also discussed this last night, and this was also a good discussion. And I made the point that if we don't spend money on repairs, despite the way the costs have risen, then further down the line, the cost of those repairs will be even greater because costs will have risen further. And also, we have a duty to our tenants to make sure that the homes that they rent are up to the highest standard possible. So I don't begrudge spending that money. And as far as I'm concerned, the housing revenue account doesn't have to make a profit. It doesn't have to pay shareholders. The money that tenants pay in rent gets ploughed back into services, and all the money that we're spending in the housing revenue account is just for that, just to provide a service to our tenants. And as far as I'm concerned, that makes me happy.
Thanks, Ian. I absolutely agree with you that there are unprecedented pressures on our housing team, our strategic housing team and housing options team, and we need to maintain response times, which effectively means that we actually need more capacity rather than maintaining what we have, particularly the way things are going. The pressures are not letting up. Clearly, with the developing situation with the Chagossians as well, that is something that I don't want to overstate, but also I don't want to understate it either. It is something that is going to need just to treat people decently. We will need more capacity to process applications and get people in. As far as the other things, you picked up on it last night, and you're absolutely right to the inflationary pressures on building materials, and for obviously the key things that we need to facilitate our repairs. We know from across the sector, across the social housing sector, there have been significant increases well above the conventional rate of inflation to all of these things, and that's had a very significant impact on the HRA. However, as I said last night as well, if it's the right thing to do to spend this money, and it is, not least of which is, as Councillor Irvine said, investment now probably saves money in the future. The alternative would be to leave our tenants in unacceptable situations with the state of repair of their houses, and we're not prepared to do that. But clearly, we will continue to apply that in a responsible way. Thank you. Councillor Chris Mullins.
I think you're right, Michael.
it's vitally important to keep the decent home standards up, but I would like to see that decent home standards extended to private rented accommodation so that they're covered by that as well. Because most of the complaints that I've been getting lately about mould and condition of houses are in the private sector of private landlords, which leaves us fairly powerless to help people. And that's where some government legislation should come in. There are good landlords out there, and God bless them. But there's a lot of poor ones who just want to exploit the situation out there, and that's not right. But we've got to look at this whole thing, not just from this 1 year, but the whole past 10, 14 years, where councils have actually been crippled by the government. We've been strangled for finances, and the pressures that have been put on councils have been immense over those years. And many councils across the country during those years have gone bankrupt and have had authorities come in to run them. So we're in a situation where people's livelihoods have been run down. I mean, the doctors, for example, I know they're public sector workers, and not ours, but they're claiming 35% increase because they've worked out that over the past decade, they've lost 35% of their wages in pay restraint. Now, take that into the public sector, and you can see that people's pay is being cut right across the public sector. I accept it doesn't help us because we've got to run our finances. It's a responsibility that's got to be picked up by the government. We cannot cut people's wages and expect them not to fight back and expect them not to argue to restore as much as possible of those missing wages. And that's what's happening. I feel confident now because at least we've got a government that is going to talk to the unions and try and negotiate and try and come to some settlements. Where historically we've had ministers, Tory ministers, who've refused to meet unions, refused to talk, and that's been a consistent problem. So we cannot go on like that, and we have to make our representation to government as well. I do feel sorry for young people in housing because I don't know how they're supposed to get a foot on the ladder, and something has really got to be done in general about housing. I would like to have a bigger commitment than we seem to be heading for at the moment on council housing, and that's where we need to go so we can give our young people the chance to get a home for themselves and their families. But it's a real problem, and for the young people, really, I don't know what their future holds at the moment. I'm hoping that somebody in government comes up with an answer. I also feel sorry for people with mortgages, because those mortgages are through the sky. And when we talk glibly about inflation being down 2%, ask the people who are paying mortgages what they're paying, how much their mortgages have gone up each month, and how they're managing to pay those mortgages. Because I just think that that's an awful situation to be in. I'm thankfully mortgage free. I'm one of the lucky ones. But I should be at my age, I suppose. But, I mean, I just think people have to struggle, in this country. The Chagosians are very much the fault of government. And government caused that situation. And then they give them passports to come here because they have to recognise that they did wrong to them. So they made them British citizens. So they simply get on a plane and come here and expect to get benefits and things, and they're struggling, and they don't meet any of our criteria if they're single males for homelessness or whatever, and I do feel sorry for them, but it's a problem created by government once again, dumped on councils. And where are councils supposed to go? How are we supposed to manage these situations? We have an opportunity now, Michael, to make representation. We have a Labour MP as well, and we can make representations to government. And I'm sure all over the country, many councils will be saying things have got to change, things have got to get better. You've got a time in history when there's never been so many billionaires made out of what's been going on. And people have got richer and richer and richer. And that's where all the money's gone. It's not in the society, it's not circulating around ordinary people who try to pay their way and shopping. It's up the top in private bank accounts, and something's got to be done about that as well. We have serious situation in this country of issues that we have to start to deal with, and that can only start with government. So our job has got to be to lobby that government.
Thank you, Councillor Mullins. I do agree. Everyone deserves decent homes, including in the private rented sector. I would point out that the council does have regulatory powers to enforce minimum standards in the private rented sector. It might not be as good as our own standards in our council houses, but that still is there. And I would say if anyone has any concerns about private rented accommodation, that they should report it to the council, to the private sector rented team, so they can investigate. So, I mean, you can make a quick point, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't want to come back in again, but people are scared stiff of doing that. I had a case in Langley Green recently, and they was frightened of getting a Section 21 or getting thrown out of their vicious landlord who was really living in terrible conditions, but they're frightened to involve the council.
No, absolutely, and I mean one should point out that actually anyone who has retaliatory action taken against them for reporting a landlord for standards would have a defence against an eviction notice. But saying that, we are straying somewhat from the financial outturn item that's on the agenda now. So, yes, thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment? No, I'm not seeing anyone. In that case, I move that the Cabinet approves the recommendations as set out in 2.2 A to G on pages 9 to 10 of the agenda pack. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Nawaz. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Right, we move on to item 8, which is the Treasury Management Outturn report. The Council is required by regulations to produce an annual Treasury Management review of activities in the year, reviewing outturn compared to the Treasury Management strategy. The Cabinet will have seen this report, and overall the Council was in compliance with the approved Treasury Management strategy. I went into some more detail on this at the OSC, which I won't do tonight unless there is particular questions, but I will bring in Councillor Ayling to present the Commission's comments.
The Commission considered the report FIN 659 of the Head of Corporate Finance. During the discussion with the Leader of the Council, the Head of Corporate Finance and the Chief Accountant, the following points were expressed. Noted that the authorised limit of the external borrowing set by the Council was exceeded for a short period during Q4 of 2023 and 24 and was now back within the set limit. The operational boundary and authorised limit for 24-25 had since been reviewed with the help of the Council's Treasury advisors and has been increased. Information was provided on the detailed funding available within the strategy. It was noted that the commercial properties, excluding the Town Hall, had achieved a rate of return of 8.8%. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ayling. Let's just Councillor Crowe.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Hopefully, this might be a relevant and strategic debate on this item. We can live in hope. It's good to see that the council is now getting better returns than what we were previously. You recall I previously spoken at Cabinet about returns that did not look that good. So it is good to see that also, indeed, some are locked in until next year at higher rates as well, which indeed is good to see. So there may well be somewhat of a lag. There's a lot of talk of interest rates coming down. I think the next meeting is in August, and while it's possible there might be a 0.25% drop there, as I said on the previous item, I do think we are going to see, when I say higher, these are actually more the long-term average. People forget that interest rates for longer, partly because I suspect while inflation has come down to the Bank of England target, and I suspect that it may well go up again because of potential policies from the new government, but we will wait and see what happens there. There was one or two things that I did want to just flag in the days to mature. Some that didn't seem in the this is on page 52 in the report. Doesn't seem to some of them don't seem to match. So, for example, the Derbyshire County Council, where it was locked in at 1.5%. It's saying 40 and 60 days for those two, but actually it's pretty much a day under a year for each of them, from my calculation, if those dates are correct. And also my eyes were drawn to the short-term deposit at Spelthorne Borough Council, which was 11 days at 7.5%, which is really good to see, albeit for a short time. But again, my reckoning is the 28th of March, the 11th of February, the 11th of April is not 11 days. Those were the two that I noticed. So I just wonder whether that number, the days to mature, should be the number of days between the dates of issue and maturity. I'd welcome any response on that if anyone's able to clarify that, because if they are, then at least a couple of those columns are wrong. The government have talked a little bit about trying to get greater returns out of money held in pension in the government pension funds, and I think that's a sensible idea. And while I appreciate that liquidity, security and yield is the how we determine our treasury management, as and when interest rates do start to slowly track down, as I think they will, we will of course be getting less income from our holdings. So therefore it'd be good to still look for other opportunities, like we have done with the investment properties, where the return overall has been quite good, and to see what else we can do to potentially, whilst obviously not taking any undue risks with the council's finances, seeing if we can perhaps be a little bit more adventurous, just to be able to maintain the level of returns that we have. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. I would say in the last year that all our Treasury investments received an average rate of return of 5%, which despite having a couple of legacy investments at low rates, and that's certainly comparable to all other local authorities. And indeed, our non-Treasury investments, our commercial properties that you rightly said have had good returns, were just under 9%, and that's disregarding the Crate building, which is yet to be fully occupied. In terms of the days to mature and the points related, I think it was Derbyshire and Spelthorne, would the finance officers like to respond on those points?
Those dates are the dates from the 31st of March, so the dates remain in.
Thank you. Right. Right. In that case, I'll now open the debate for other cabinet members. Would anyone like to say anything at this point? Doesn't look like it. Oh, Sue Mullins, yeah.
Just really quickly, because obviously it's quite a complicated thing to get your head round, but when we look at where we've been investing with local authorities, if you look at the last column where the rating is, every single one is A+, and I think that's a really good indication of how well our financial officers are working on getting the best return they can for our council.
Thank you, Sue. I think that relates to their how creditworthy they are sort of assessed to be. So if we loan it to them, then we can be very sure we'll get the money back. So I think that's part of it. Yes, I think it's I think it's the right approach that we lend our money to very secure institutions, which we do. Right. In that case, looking around, I don't see anyone else, so I'll move on to the recommendation. So I move that the Cabinet improves the recommendations as set up in 2.28D on page 38 of the agenda pack. Can I have a seconder? I saw Councillor Noyce first. Sorry, gentlemen. Right, is that agreed? Thank you. We will now consider the implementation of the Procurement Act report. This report has come to Cabinet because there have been legislative developments, which mean we need to update our processes. So it's quite a technical document. So I think if there's anything to be said, I might ask our officer Becca if there's anything that she considers needs to be done further to introduce the report. Yeah.
Is that on? Yes. So basically, the new Procurement Act comes into force on the 28th of October. So we have to make some changes in terms of our contract standing orders, which we present at Crawley as the Crawley Procurement Code. So essentially, these are things that we have to do as part of the new legislation as a result of Brexit. It's now sort of national legislation.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll open the debate for other Cabinet members. I think we're all fairly content with what we've seen in the report, and doesn't look like anyone has any questions. So if that's the case, I don't see anyone. I move that the Cabinet delegates authority to the Head of Corporate Finance to review and make minor modifications to the Procurement Code as and when amendments are required, following a review or any subsequent change to legislation and statutory guidance are introduced. Generic Delegation 7 will be used to enact this recommendation, which I think means it doesn't need to come back to Cabinet, basically. And request full council to improve the revised Procurement Code attached as Appendix A to this report. So can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Sue Mullins. Is that agreed? Thank you very much, Cabinet. Then item 10, we will now consider the forward programme of key procurements, July to December report, along with a supplementary agenda item for the additional contract tender, seeking a managing operator for the Crawley Innovation Centre, which will be included within Appendix A. The paper for that, in the supplementary agenda, there is an amendment to Appendix A, which people will, I think everyone has a hard copy of. On the final page, marked in red, Cabinet members should be able to see the addition, the recent addition to that's been tabled to the procurement for the forward programme. That's essentially to make sure that the Innovation Centre, which is making good progress and is on schedule to open as anticipated, which is impressive in itself, but we don't want anything to slow it down. And one thing that would slow it down is if we don't have a managing operator in place in time, and we don't want to slow that up, because the Innovation Centre is a fantastic idea. It's definitely the way forward for the future, and anything that would slow it down and delay the opening of this centre even by weeks or months, I think would be extremely unwelcome. So that hence why it's been introduced now. Other than that, there are the other things that are coming forward are in the appendix. This is effectively for noting, really, but if anyone wants to comment or ask any questions, I think now's the time to say it. So do I have any members of the Cabinet who'd like to make any points? I'm not seeing anyone. So I assume we're all content with that, in which case I move that the Cabinet endorse the procurement programme for July to December 24, along with the additional items documented within the supplementary agenda, delegate authority to myself as Leader of the Council in consultation with the relevant Cabinet member, relevant Head of Service and Head of Governance, People and Performance to approve the award of the contract following an appropriate procurement process. This is with the exception of following procurements which will be subject to separate Cabinet reports, which would be waste collection in the Hall Theatre. Delegate the negotiation, approval and completion of all relevant legal documentation following the awarding of the contracts to the relevant Head of Service, Head of Governance, People and Performance, Head of Corporate Finance, in consultation with the appropriate Cabinet member. So can I have a seconder? Councillor Rana, they put a hand up, so I'll take her. Yes, that's fine, don't worry. Is that agreed? Thank you. Right. We will now move on to consideration of the exempt reports. Therefore, I propose that under section 100A, subsection 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act by virtue of the paragraph specified against the items. Is that agreed? Thank you. The recording and live stream will now finish, so we can discuss this exempt business. So I wish to thank anyone for watching, and there'll be a brief interlude now before we move on to the next item of business.